Hi everyone, welcome to Draw with Jan channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw and shade a cat using color pencils. I have used Carandache luminance color pencils for this, and I have posted the details of materials used in the description of this video. It took me about 15 hours to complete this drawing. It is not as complicated as it looks. It just needs investment of your time and attention to detail. Let's get started. For the background, I'm using black and Cassel earth for the dark shades, brown ochre and burnt sienna for the mid-tones, and white and brown ochre for the lighter shades. I'm following the reference picture for the direction of the strokes. If you notice, I've used diagonal strokes for the most part of the body. This drawing is based on an original portrait photo of a cat, and the background in the original image was blurred. Hence, I'm not adding too much details for the fur. I'm just trying to bring out the different shades of colors and retain the blurry effect to the extent possible. For this part of the leg, I'm also using burnt ochre. I'm also adding in a bit of grey to produce the hazy effect. As you can see, I'm adding multiple layers of shading. I'm not applying too much pressure while shading. Applying too much pressure could damage the surface of your paper and prevent you from adding more layers later on. Once I've created the layers that I need for the background, I'm going to use a solvent with a paintbrush for blending the colors. I'm using an odorless mineral spirit for this. This gives a smooth finish to the drawing. Now moving on to the eye, I'm first creating an outline using black. I'm drawing two black lines, and within those black lines, I'm using light grey for the shading. For the eye, I'm leaving the highlights blank. For the inner part of the eye, I'm using light green for the first layer of shading. Then I'm using different shades of green and brown to add in the details. Since I'm adding multiple layers, I'm not applying any pressure while shading. If you notice, I have shaded the upper part of the eye dark to bring in the shadow effect. This makes your drawing look more realistic. Now moving on to the other eye, I'm repeating the same procedure, drawing black outlines and then leaving the highlights blank. Using different shades of green and brown to bring in the details in the eye, and shading the upper part of the eye slightly dark to bring in the shadow effect. Now moving on to the fur. I'm using Cassel earth for the first layer of shading. I'm drawing very small lines and following the direction of the fur in the reference picture. You need not follow every single line in the reference picture, but try to follow the overall pattern in the reference picture. I'm marking all the areas where I see dark shades in the reference picture. I'm now using brown ochre for the next layer of shading. Again, I'm drawing small lines to produce the fur effect. While fur seems complicated, it is actually quite simple to draw. All it needs is patience. As you can see, it is just drawing those small tiny lines over and over again multiple times to produce the furry effect. This is a time-lapse video of my drawing. I'm actually drawing it very slowly. It took me about 15 hours to complete this drawing. I'm now using burnt ochre, and I'm repeating the process of drawing those small lines. As I'm shading, I'm trying to blend in the dark and the light shades by using this as the mid-tone. Again, take your time to draw those tiny lines. I'm also adding some bit of detailing in the eye using this color. Now moving on to the ear. There are shades of brown, red, pink and white in the ear, and there's also a lot of white hair visible in the ear. Before I get to drawing the hair, I'm trying to get the background shading right. I'm going to leave some places blank for the highlights. Now moving on to the other ear. The shades in this ear are slightly different from the shades in the other ear, so pay attention to the reference picture to get the shading right. I'm mostly using shades of pink and brown for this ear. I'm using black for the darker areas, and I've just left the outline white. Once I complete adding all the layers for the cat's face, I'm going to use a solvent for blending. I'm going to draw the hair finally after using the solvent. Using black now for the next layer for all the darker shading on the cat's face. I'm drawing thin lines, but I'm also creating some patches as seen in the reference picture. I'm also using burnt ochre to blend in black and the rest of the fur as I'm shading. As you can see, those dark patches of black and the tiny lines that you have drawn before really helps you produce a realistic fur effect. Now focusing on the lower part of the face. Again, I'm drawing tiny lines with Cassel earth and using burnt ochre for blending. Now repeating the same thing on the other side of the face. Now after completing the different layers of shading for the face, I'm going in for another layer of shading for the background. This is not necessary, but I felt the background could be a bit more darker and hence I'm adding another layer of color. I'm also adding another layer of shading to the ear to make it look darker. Now using a solvent to blend the colors before adding the highlights. Once the solvent dries, you can use a white pencil to create the highlights. I'm also using yellow ochre to create the highlights. As you can see, once you use a solvent, any highlights that you create using a lighter shade of pencil become more clearly visible. I'm now using a white pen to define those strands of hair more clearly. Also using a dark pencil to define the darker areas around it more clearly to produce a more realistic effect. As you can see, I'm not drawing continuous lines. Some of my lines are thick, some of my lines are thin, and sometimes I'm also drawing crisscross lines. Try to follow the reference picture for the overall direction of the hair. However, do not try to copy each and every single line. Keep it free flow to produce a more realistic effect. Now moving on to the other ear, I'm going to repeat the same process, first completing the background shading and then using a white pen to draw the hair. I'm now adding another layer of shading for the fur to create the dark values. I'm using black for this and I'm drawing really thin lines to draw the fur. I'm quickly going over this with a solvent to blend everything well. Now adding those details in the eye. There are visible lines in the eye, but they are curvy and not continuous, so pay attention to the details while shading. I'm now adding the dark values and then I'm going for the highlights with a white pen. I'm also drawing the hair with a white pen. I'm now adding the details in the lower part of the face and then going over with a solvent and then adding the highlights. You can do the highlights and draw the hair using a pencil too, but I prefer to use the pen because it's so much easier. I'm now doing the same thing for the other side of the face. For the nose, I'm using subtle shades of pink and grey for the shading. It's mostly white, but you will have to do a little bit of shading to bring the fluffy effect. Using a darker shade around this area for the shadow effect. Now back to defining the highlights using a white pen. I'm drawing really small lines here so that it looks like fur. While drawing the long hair on the face, always start your strokes from the bottom and keep your hand free-flowing so that the hair looks realistic. Now adding some finishing touches to the drawing. Feel free to use a solvent when needed to produce a smooth effect. However, make sure it dries well before going in with another layer of coloring over it. Make sure you get the dark values, shadows and highlights in the eyes correct because that's really going to be the center of attention in your drawing. Now before drawing the whiskers, I'm going to complete the shading in the mouth. I'm using a dark shade of grey for this. Finally, I'm using a white pen to draw the whiskers. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more drawing videos. Thank you and see you again soon.